Okay, so today we're continuing with non-Mendelian genetics. Let's really quickly review and talk about what types of genetics we've already discussed or that we've already seen. So when we talked about Mendelian genetics, this is regular Mendelian genetics. You had dominant versus recessive alleles. And this can be represented by letters such as A for big A for dominant and little a for recessive. And if you had the heterozygous genotype, if you had the heterozygous genotype, such as big A, little a, then you would display the trait that is dominant because the dominant covers the recessive. Then we talked about two types of non-Mendelian genetics. Non-Mendelian. And the first type that we had here was actually going to be co-dominance. So this was the first type. Mendelian was the first. The first of non-Mendelian, but the second type of inheritance that we talked about, how do you inherit your traits, was co-dominance. And in co-dominance, you had two alleles that represented two different things. So your example here was sickle cell anemia. You had sickle cells, and you had normal cells. You would use two different letters to represent this. In our notes, we had S and N for sickle and normal. But you could also use any other letters you wanted to, like a capital A and a capital B. They do have to be capital letters because those represent dominant alleles. In your heterozygous, or in your heterozygote, you'd have big A and big B. And what is your phenotype? What type of cells would you have? Well, you'd have sickle cells and normal cells. Then the third type of inheritance we talked about already was incomplete dominance. In incomplete dominance, our example with people was hair type. Straight hair, curly hair, wavy hair. And with incomplete dominance, let's say you had straight hair, and it really doesn't matter which you indicate as which. You have straight, could be A, and you had curly, which could be A prime. The prime was set by that little apostrophe at the top. Now, as long as you keep your two extremes as A and A prime, then you're fine. But whatever's in the middle, whatever's mixed together, and remember, mixed together by that apostrophe, by that prime, such as A prime, this would give you a mix of both, and this would give you wavy hair. Okay? So here are three types of genetics so far. Mendelian, where you just have regular dominance versus recessive. Okay? Your heterozygote, big A, little a, would have the phenotype of whatever the big A stands for. In codominance, both alleles show up, both traits show up, both phenotypes show up. So if you have AB genotype, then you'd have sickle and normal cells. In incomplete dominance, this is where the prime, that little stick apostrophe, mixes together your two phenotypes, straight hair and curly hair, to give you wavy hair. Okay? So that would be A prime, wavy hair. Well, today, we're going to continue with some more non-Mendelian genetics. And the first kind here is going to be multiple alleles. And in multiple alleles, this means that more than two alleles exist for a trait. Okay? Again, more than two alleles exist for a trait. So your example here is actually blood type. And we have four different types of blood types. We have type A, type AB, type B, type O. Okay? And these represent your phenotypes. And so when you're talking about blood types, it's different because you have to have a capital I, and then you'll indicate the A or B as a superscript, a letter above that letter. So all of these here are actually I's, so make sure when you write them, they look like capital I's and lowercase i's. Okay, so make sure you indicate that. You don't want to think that they're L's, and they're just not random things. They're I's. What I want you to think of this as is that the big I represents a red blood cell, because we are talking about blood type, and the A's or the B's represent little tags, little name tags on that red blood cell. Has to be a capital I because the red blood cell has to be big enough or strong enough to carry those A or B name tags on it. Notice that to be blood type A, you have to have big I, A, big I, A, or you can be big I, A, little I. So this is a combination of things. This is your dominant versus recessive. A recessive little I actually means that you have a red blood cell, but you have no name tags on it. Okay, no name tags on it. Notice if you have two little i's, little I, well again, you have your red blood cell, no name tags, and so that actually means that you have type O blood. Some things to keep in mind here, if you have genotype IAIB, well, you're heterozygous, and you have the phenotype AB blood. That means that on your red blood cells, you have red blood cells with A name tags, and red blood cells with B name tags, okay? An easy way to help you remember this is so you have A and B on the same cell. Now the other thing is, if you're thinking about blood types, you can think about getting blood donated. Or if you're in an emergency situation and need to take in some blood. Well, when that happens, you actually have to have the same matching name tags on your red blood cells. So for example, if I was type A blood and on my red blood cells I had A, but there was an emergency and accidentally gave me B blood cells with B on top of them, well then my body would know this is the wrong type of blood. It definitely didn't come from my body, and then that's when I would get even more sick because my body would try to kill off these red blood cells because it doesn't know that I actually needed them. And it actually couldn't really use them because now you have a problem with your body being able to accept that type of red blood cell. So notice that for genotype, for A blood type, you can be homozygous, IA, or you can even be heterozygous, IA little I. This counts as being heterozygous. Also for AB blood type, well, you're definitely heterozygous. You're IAIB. If you're B blood type, you can be heterozygous, IB little I. Now, if you are homozygous, have two of the same alleles, that could be for A blood type, IAIA. That could be for B blood type, IBIB, or that could be for O blood type, little I. So here's a little problem that we can actually use in the Punnett Square that we have provided below your notes. Make sure you had that chart filled in. But here's our example. It says to cross a heterozygous type A mom with a type O dad. So make sure you write down that mom is hetero A, so that you have a little example of what this problem is asking for. If mom is heterozygous type A, what does that mean her genotype is? Take a second to look back on the chart. Pause if you need to. If mom is heterozygous type A, well, she would be IA little I. What does this really mean? This means she has some red blood cells with the A marker on them, and some red blood cells that are blank. And it says to cross with a dad that is type O. Dad is type O. So what is his genotype? Well, type O doesn't have any name tags on it, so it's little top, their genotype on top, just to keep it easy. IA, little I. Dad is little I, little I. Remember, you can start with either the top ones or the side ones. Bring them all the way down or all the way across. So I keep IA. Here's a little I. Bring it down to IA again. And my little I. And these little I's will go straight across. So what do we have? Well, in these two boxes, we have what blood type? Type A. In these boxes here, what blood type do we have? We have type O. So here it asks you, what is the chance, and chance is going to refer to a percentage, they have a child with type O blood. And each box represents 25%. So what percent chance do they have? Well, they have a 50% chance of having a child with type O blood. Okay? And so the next one that we're going to talk about, the next type of Mendelian genetics, or non-Mendelian genetics we're going to talk about, is actually sex-linked. And with sex-linked inheritance, you actually have to talk about if it's a boy or a girl, X or Y chromosomes, and you'll actually discover that there's certain traits like color blindness that are linked to your gender, your sex chromosomes. So here we go. It says, for sex-linked, this is a trait found on your X chromosome. Hemophilia and color blindness are recessive disorders. For our phenotype, there's a couple things that we need to remember before we even start. If you are a female, and let's make sure we write this down. If you are a female, this means you have the XX chromosomes. Mom gave you an X chromosome, dad gave you an X chromosome, so you're a female. For a male, your mom gave you your X chromosome, but dad, remember, determines gender, and he gave you a Y chromosome. And a Y chromosome makes you a male. So, a couple things to think about. A female is actually less likely to have a sex-linked trait, but can express a sex-linked trait. So, less likely, but can express a sex-linked trait. Let's add in less likely to have sex-linked trait, but can express a sex-linked trait. For males, they express sex-linked traits more often because they have only one X sex chromosome. One X sex chromosome. Notice here, males are XY. So how does that affect us? Well, our sex-linked chromosomes are found on the X chromosome. So for a man, he has only one chance of either having the disorder or not having the disorder. For a female, she'll have two chances. So we'll see what that means in just 1 second. Here's our chart for sex-linked disorders. Notice it's separated for females and males. If you're unaffected, that means you don't have the disease. If you're a carrier, that means you can pass on the disease, but you're not sick. So make sure you add in not sick for the carrier. And also keep in mind that no male carriers for a sex-linked disorder can occur. Go ahead and pause for a second and make sure you completely copy down this chart. It's really important that you have it. And I want you to take a minute and see if you can solve this sex-linked example. It says cross a colorblind dad with a mom who is a carrier. So make sure you use your affected, unaffected. If the dad is colorblind, that means he is affected. That means he is affected. And if mom is a carrier, that means she has the allele, but she doesn't have the disease. Try to see if you can fill in that chart based on the chart we had earlier. And the last thing we have our notes is polygenic traits. So make sure you take a minute to pause again and copy this down. This is talking about traits that are carried on many genes. And this can talk about actually your skin color or even your height.